a question I often get asked, is it a good time to buy a house? I mean, houses are ridiculously expensive right now. They're costing an average of $450,000. And what about the interest rates? They're super, super high. Let me tell you something. It is always a good time to buy a house, regardless of whether houses are too expensive or too cheap. You don't believe me? You still think that expensive houses and high interest rates are an issue? Let's check this out. Let's go back in time to 2020 at the start of the pandemic, right? So what happened during the pandemic financially? Well, the Fed came in and decided to lower interest rates. And what happens when we have low interest rates? We get access to cheap money. What makes money cheap? Well, it's cheap because you get to borrow it and you barely pay any interest on it because thanks to the Feds, interest rates are low. So that means you can borrow an XYZ amount of money and yeah, you will pay interest, but you won't pay as much. So that's why it's called cheap money. So what happens when there's cheap money flowing around the economy? Well, people want to spend it. People want to get money and buy things. It's kind of like the buy now, pay later in a way. Only, you won't get penalized with high interest. And one of the things that a lot of people wanted to buy was real estate. So you have a house here, and then you got a bunch of people interested in the same house. So you got this person right here, then this person right here, then you got another person here, another one here, another one here, and so on, right? And so what does this create? It creates something called a bidding war, meaning multiple people are interested in the same house and therefore they're competing to buy the same house. And the only way to get this house is by paying money. So you got this one person who made a bid, but then this person came in and said, you know what? I'm going to put more money. I'm going to pay more for that house because I want to buy it. Money is cheap anyways. But then someone else comes in and no, I'm going to pay more for it. And then someone else comes in and say, I'm going to pay even more money for it because I'm going to get to buy that house. So this single house that you saw here went from costing this much all the way to costing this much. The so-called average of $450,000 in 2023, right? And this was back in 2020. So the Fed comes in and says, oh my goodness, this is ridiculous. A lot of people are going crazy. Housing is not available and people keep bidding higher prices on these houses. They're going to make things impossible to afford in the future. So we need to do something and we need to bring the interest rates up so that people won't want to buy as much, right? And it happens so that they raise interest gradually all the way to the point that at the time of this episode recording, it's hitting somewhere in the range of 7%, right? So 7%, give or take, maybe a little bit less, maybe a little bit more. But at the time of this episode recording, 7%. So what happens when you have a high rate? So cheap money goes away. And now money becomes expensive. And what happens when money becomes expensive? Less people will want to borrow that money because, hey, they're going to pay back with interest. This is why people sometimes hesitate using credit cards because credit cards have high interest rates. So yes, you can buy something, but then you're going to have to pay a lot more money for that stuff that you just bought because you have to pay back whatever money you use plus interest. And it's the same analogy here. When interest rates goes up, less people want to borrow money. And what happens when there's less people borrowing money? Well, there's less people buying things. And what happens when less people buy things? Well, let's just go over the example of the same house. So you have this house here in 2023, and we're dealing with interest rates at 7%. So you have only a few people willing to buy this because obviously they cannot afford to buy more. And they also cannot afford to bid more. Even if they want to bid more for the house, they cannot because housing prices are already really expensive as it is. And borrowing money through a mortgage is even more expensive, right? So in this scenario right here, many will still ask me, with everything that's going on right now, high housing prices and high interest rate, do you still think that it is a good time to buy a house? It is still a good time to buy a house. It is always a good time to buy a house. And here's why. So in this situation, because we have less people bidding for these houses, there's only a few things that can happen. So one is that housing prices, they stay where they are and they don't go up anymore. And in the case of some areas, housing prices could go down. Not completely, but they could still go down. If that happens to be your area, let me know. If none of this is happening in your area, please also let us know in the comment section so that way we can learn from your area and help everybody out. So coming back to this example, houses stay where they are, or if you get lucky, they can start going down in prices, which means one way or the other, you're catching a break from housing prices going up. But there's still the issue about high interest rate, right? Why would I buy now? Because, hey, houses can continue to go down and yada, yada, and then the high interest rates. If I were you, I would think about it twice. Why? Because there is something called the news and understanding how the economy works and how everything ties together. So rumor has it that the Fed in 2024 is planning to reduce interest rates again because inflation seems to be more or less under control. They might either want to keep things as it is, or they might start gradually decrease interest in 2024. So once again, what happens when interest rates go down? That means money becomes cheap again. And what happens when money is cheap? People want to borrow it, people want to take out loans, and they want to start buying stuff. So once again, one of the most common things people want to buy is a house. And so you're going to see a repeat of this scenario. So you're going to have a bunch of people engaging in wars because, hey, well, maybe housing prices are a little bit up, but guess what? Money is cheap and rates are low. So why not? Let me just come in and just do my bidding, right? So the same story repeats itself. This time in 2024, someone comes in, offers a bid. Someone else comes in and said, no, I want a bit more. And then another person comes in and said, no, I'm going to pay more for this house because I want it. And then someone else comes in and says, no, I'm going to pay even more because I want this house. And now you will be facing an issue and where a house back in 2023 that used to cost $450,000 could in 2024 go all the way up to possibly costing $500,000, if not more, right? So it is the same house, but because you decided not to take action because you were waiting for something to drop, either the prices or the interest rates, let's say it goes down to 3% or less, right? What does it matter? You are now dealing with a more expensive house. That's the price you get to pay for not taking action at the time. I remember that back in 2020, I specifically created a bunch of videos that you have to buy a house back then. Regardless of what was happening, of all the noise, I know there were a lot of content out there, a lot of YouTube videos saying, hey, it is not a good time to buy, it is not a good time to buy. And some people decided to pay attention and follow that advice. And some decided to ignore that advice and they bought. For those who bought, they were able to get a nice house at a good price, at a good, cheap rate. And those who didn't get to buy are now facing houses at $450,000 plus 7% interest. And if you decide to wait for things to cool up a bit this year and hopes for the rate to go down, now I had just shown you what could happen next year because of what's doing. That's why you need to educate yourself and understand how everything connects. The Fed is doing what they're supposed to do, and it's your job to understand what does it mean for you in the market. So if you wait for 2024, yes, congratulations, you will lock yourself in a low rate, but then you will be facing a much more expensive house. Yeah, I get you. I mean, I can buy a house now, but I'm still stuck with a 7% interest, and I don't like it. Well, I mean, is it really the end of the world if you have to pay a 7% interest? Let's find out. So to recap, in 2023, you bought a house and you pay $450,000, right? And then in 2024, your house went up to $500,000, so to speak, right? And let's say here in 2023, you pay $450,000 for this house, right? So 2023. And then in 2024, you got an appreciation of $50,000. So an appreciation done by the market, prices went up, and now you have an additional equity of $50,000. So if you bought a house in 2023 and you got stuck with a 7% interest, you can do magic in 2024. You can do a cash out refi, right? That it's in essence another mortgage. You are refinancing the mortgage. You will refinance the mortgage in 2023 at the new low rate, let's say, for example, 3% maybe. You will refinance your existing mortgage. You will enjoy the advantage of getting a low mortgage, and you get to pull the equity out because you were able to buy the house at a cheaper price earlier, and now you get to enjoy the fruits of your labor. You get to enjoy your strategy, which is to pull out the equity, and you're going to use this additional $50,000 and you can buy another property with it. You can use this $50,000 as the down payment of your future property. It could be your vacation home or it could be an investment property. And you are going to buy a new house thanks to this down payment, thanks to the fact that you took action. And that's how you get access to another property. And to add more icing in the cake, you get to enjoy it at this very new low rate thanks to the Fed. And that, my dear followers, is the reason why I always say that it is always a good time to buy a house. For those who want to learn how to buy a house the right way or how to invest in real estate the right way, I want to invite you to check out this webinar right here. You can find the link down in the description box below or in the comment section. And the webinar is completely free. All you got to do is to sign up. And in that webinar, you're going to learn how to buy real estate the right way, even if you don't have enough funds available. You're going to learn how to do that from scratch. All you got to do is just to sign up and show up. I'll see you in the webinar. Take care. Bye-bye.